Hello, I'm Terry David Mulligan, and this is Mulligan Stew, the podcast. Music, film, food, and wine. Music leads the way this week. Colin Linden. Actually, television could be part of that. I'll explain in a moment. Colin Linden, singer, songwriter, player, producer. Just an all-round genius in the studio and on stage. A charter member of Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, one of the great bands to ever come out of Canada. Currently in Nashville, has been there for a while now, has his own studio. As a matter of fact, he'll be just outside the back door of that studio with the birds in the trees and his wife not too far away. Okay, for those of you who have been locked away somewhere, Colin Linden is a true, well, they call him a Renaissance man, but he's more than that. He's a member of Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, singer-songwriter, prolific record producer, musical director of the hit television series Nashville, and has been a sideman for some of the best in the business, including Bob Dylan, Bruce Cockburn, Emmylou Harris, Robert Plant, and Alison Krauss. Played the White House with T-Bone Burnett, doing a gospel special. Just recently, he's been in his studio with Keb Mo and Taj Mahal, and Blackie, and Bruce Cockburn, Lucinda Williams, and David Boxcar Gates. For the new album, Amour, Colin hooked up with his good friend Luther Dickinson from the North Mississippi All-Stars and the Black Crowes, and they just laid it out. Great old songs. A couple of newbies in there. They had some special guests in the studio with them. Rachel Davis, Ruby Amanfu, plus two of Colin's Nashville TV series buddies, Sam Palladino and Jonathan Jackson. And a very special guest, Billy Swan, who sings the lead on Lover Please, the song he wrote that became a hit for Clyde McPhatter. We're starting to see tour dates for Colin in Western Canada in the first and second week of May. Colin Linden on Mulligan Stew, the podcast. Where have we found you, Colin?
I am sitting in the back, outside of the back door of my studio in Nashville, Tennessee, just having finished a lovely breakfast with my wife, who is weeding as we speak.
Very cool. Very cool. Especially that you're there. Did you ever sit, speaking of back in behind studios, did you ever walk out the back door of Sun Records and see the bench sitting there in the shade under the tree?
I have. I have seen it. I've seen the back and I've seen the bench. I don't know if I've seen it in the shade. I've seen it in the rain.
No, okay. And there's a coffee shop off to the right. So you know for a fact that
yes,
all those boys, all those cats, all those wonderful cats would go outside, have a smoke, they'd go and get a coffee, or they'd sit and look in the window, and it all happened right there.
It's really amazing. It's really amazing. And the environment really does contribute to all of it.
So describe your room then, your studio.
Our studio is 1,000 square feet. It has a 16-foot peaked roof. And in the northwest corner is the Richard Bell corner. It has Richard's B3.
Wow.
That was the house B3 at Bearsville Studios for a long time. And Richard bought it when he got off the road with Janis Joplin. And, after she passed, I think he bought it in 1971. So that's in the corner. And next to it is the piano from Gunner's music room, Gunner being the character played by Sam Palladio on the Nashville television show. Right. So that's in the corner, as is an 1800s Victorian couch that belonged to my mother-in-law, actually belonged to my wife's grandmother at one point. Next to it, on the other side of the building is what is the control room, although there's no walls or anything, that houses my 1970s Neve console that I just got, that I'm very excited about how good it sounds. And in the room, there's tons of guitars and amplifiers, and it's one big room that is divided loosely by 6 large glass gobos that we bought from the Nashville set as well, from the fake studio called Trax Recording,
right,
on the Nashville set. And the room in the center of the room on the west wall, there's a beautiful stained glass window and an old church pew right underneath it. We call that area the sanctuary, and that's where, when you're singing and playing, that's where the singer and player is. Sometimes that's where the drums are. And the carpet that's underneath that is the carpet from the Bluebird set of Nashville, the fake Bluebird from the Nashville set. So that's mostly it. And then there's a bedroom with a very comfortable bed that also doubles as a booth for singers or drummers.
Of course.
But that's pretty well it.
Okay.
And there's a really nice bathroom, and come on down and visit us.
Yeah, I'll come. Don't you love the fact, by the way, just one more geeky question. Don't you love the fact that Tedeschi Trucks Band, their latest album was recorded in analog?
It is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful sound.
I mean, it's just coming full circle. It's just, why did we give this up in the first place?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's reasons for all of it, and it's all good. If you make nice sounds on it, it's all good. But that certainly is it's a part of a sound palette that's identifiable and that's glorious, and that I'm glad has not been abandoned because of its inherent cost.
Yep.
And maintenance and skill level to operate and those things that would make you turn away from it. It's still a wonderful sound.
I have there's two reasons why I'm calling you, Colin. Well, there's three. One is to stay in touch and to hear the sound of your lips. And secondly, to examine the relationship between you and Luther Dickinson and your new album, Amour, which is not your normal. It is not a normal album. Repeated listening brings it closer and closer and closer together. You got Jimmy Reed, Charlie Feathers, Jesse Stone, Bo Diddley tunes. Who's the bird? Who's doing the bird imitations?
Oh, I think that's a robin, probably. The robins were closest by.
Okay, fine. Amour.
Would know for sure.
So there's if you hear bird-like sounds, my friends, that's a bird in the tree. Okay.
There's a robin and a cardinal.
And
it's one or the other.
Did Amour
kind of red bird?
Did Amour come together quickly for you?
Yes. Once we started recording, it did. I got an idea. In a lot of ways, I think the medium of making an album, we're somewhat liberated from it being stock, but I don't think that it negates the fact that it's a wonderful. It's a wonderful format. If you're listening to music that lasts, anywhere from 35 to 45 minutes, it's a wonderful time to be able to sit and digest all of that. So I think that you can make albums that are not just collections of your newest songs, which is sometimes of course it's a wonderful thing to do.
Sure.
But I had thought that just over the years I had noticed sort of a commonality of songs that have resonated so strongly for me through my whole life, and most of them are love songs, and most of the songs on this record are basically songs that I've known for my whole life, and I thought of these songs having a sort of an inherent melancholy in the melodies. There was a longing in all of the melodies, and I didn't even think, oh well, this is a blues song, this is a country song, this is a quote unquote rock and roll song. I didn't even think in those terms. I just thought there was a kind of a commonality, and I thought the melodies were beautiful enough that they could be played without singing, and that they could be interpreted by any kind of artist. These songs could be interpreted by Ray Charles, or they could be interpreted by Willie Nelson, or they could be interpreted by Iggy Pop, because of their inherent truth. So Luther was on the Nashville set a couple of years ago. He plays in one of the bands, miming tracks in one of the bands to a pretty famous scene from a TV show where Deacon and Raina, Charles Esten and Connie Britton, get married. So he's in Jim Lauderdale's band because he had produced Jim Lauderdale's album at the time. So Jim was the band at the wedding in the TV show. So, needless to say, Luther and I had an opportunity to sit around for a few hours because there's a lot of waiting sometimes, especially with shooting on location. And he and I had become friendly a couple of years earlier. We just became immediate pals, fast friends. And I had told him this idea, and just that this body of songs, and I gave him a list of the songs, and he thought it was a great idea for a record. And he said, "Hey, when you get around to doing that record, maybe that should be the project you and me do together." Because we had talked from the first time that we met. We wanted to do something together. So it took a little while after that for an opportunity to come about, but I got a window of time with a great friend of mine, an engineer named Mark Rubel, at Blackbird Studios here in Nashville. And we collected the songs, and we collected a few players, and then thought of a few wonderful singers who could come and join us. And the actual recording of the record came together very quickly after that.
We're going to give some names for some of these tunes, so you might want to introduce the stars in the studio, Rachel and Ruby, and the cast.
They're so wonderful. Rachel Davis is a really good singer-songwriter, banjo player, instrumentalist from Michigan. Who played with her family band for a long time in Michigan. She's made a few albums on her own. And she's married to a great bassist who's on this record named Dominic Davis, who is, I guess, mostly more known for playing with Jack White than anything else. Okay. But Dominic played on a lot of the Nashville soundtrack, and we became friendly over that. And he's a great player. And Rachel has sung before with Luther's band, North Mississippi All-Stars. So it was one of those ideas where it felt like a really great fit. Rachel's such a unique, soulful, timeless vocalist. And Ruby Amour, she sang with Jack White's all-girl band, but she also was part of a duo named Sam and Ruby that made some records that were pretty famous. And she's a wonderful singer, and she had been on the Nashville show a few times, and I'd gotten to meet her. Loved her singing. I asked her, and she complied to come and sing on Bruce Cockburn's Bone on Bone album, and I loved working with her. I thought she was such a soulful, interesting talent and such a great person. So I asked her if she would sing a couple. And one of the songs I really wanted to do was Lover Please, Clyde McPhatter.
Of course.
Written by the great Billy Swan, who I've known a little bit since I was a kid, Chris Christopherson. And I just called Billy out of the blue, and I don't see him that often, but I'm very fond of him, and we always got along really well. And he just immediately said, and he knows Luther, of course, from the Memphis connections and from Jim Dickinson, Luther's dad. So Billy just came over to the studio and sang on it too, and we did all of those vocals were live vocals, and we got Sam Palladio to come and sing Crazy Arms, Sam from the Nashville TV show. And then I thought I forgot to remember to forget, I asked Jonathan Jackson, who played Avery on the TV show, to come and sing, because he has this beautiful ethereal voice, deep spirituality in his singing, but he also has a lot of like Elvis and Roy Orbison in his roots too, and sings that kind of classic song with such honesty and emotion. So that in a nutshell is the singers, and then I sang a couple.
And you wrote one.
Well, did I?
Well, you did. Didn't you write Careless Love?
Well, didn't really write it. Came up with that arrangement for it.
Well, hold on a second now. Because I'm looking at your credits, and I'm looking at those three little dots you put in Spotify, and you say, show me the songwriting credits. You and Luther are listed as the songwriters.
Yeah. It should be traditional, arranged by me and Luther. Because it's a really old song. It's a song that dates at least 100 years old. And in some ways, in all ways, for me, that song was sort of the id of the record. That was kind of the North Star for the record. Because that song, to me, it encompasses everything that all of these songs do, but it did it 100 years ago. So, and it just had this beautiful melody that could be disconnected from time, like from meter. And that's sort of how we started.
We're talking about the album Amour with Colin Linden, who partnered with his pal Luther Dickinson and his great friends in the studio and the Tennessee Valentines to make Amour, the latest album from Colin's vast career. And by the way, it's on Stony Plain Records, which is where you should be.
Yeah.
Don't Let Go, the Jesse Stone song, which is flat out gospel. It's this call and response. You can hear him in church. You got Rachel Davis there. You got Ruby, and it's just wonderful.
Yeah, that song actually was not on my original list. I have to thank T-Bone Burnett for that.
Wow.
Because I had told him about the concept, and sort of just out of the blue, he said, "Oh, you should record Don't Let Go." And, Roy Hamilton, Don't Let Go. And I thought, no, shit, which is a song I've known for, 40 years, like known to hear for over 40 years. But it would have far from my mind to think of recording it. But if he suggested, he's probably got a pretty good reason. So we had a great time recording it.
I'd love to hear that live, by the way, because you could extend that song. That's fantastic. And you follow it up. I love the fact that you got a Jimmy Reed song in there, Honest I Do. Who's singing? Is that Ruby?
That's Rachel Davis.
Rachel,
singing on
okay.
that. And it's one of those songs. One of my favorite things in the world is hearing blues singers sing melodies that sound like they could be country songs. And that's what Honest I Do is. I'm sure I've known that song my whole life because it was a pop hit, right, for Jimmy Reed.
Yeah.
There's certain songs, and you hear a lot of it in Louisiana-based music, but one of the great sort of swamp pop blues artists, Lazy Lester, and Slim Harpo, those singers were, quote-unquote blues singers, but the melodies that they sang and the way they sang were like country music to me, and the same kind of sweetness.
And what I love about Jimmy Reed is always the groove. Always the groove.
Oh.
How did you do that?
The groove is king. Well, there were 3 guitar players on a lot of those records. 3 guitar players playing really simply together.
Huh.
And it's something that both Luther and I really admired. And one of the things that we did on the record was we played through the same amplifier. And we did that so that, one of the things about playing through the same amp is if you step on each other, you can't hear either of you. So you have to stay out of each other's way.
Nice. Very nice. Well done. Talk about messing with the system. By the way, you mentioned Chris Christopherson, and I have an interview with him that I just discovered I hadn't played back. I did it at the Calgary Folk Festival years ago. You did For the Good Times.
Yeah. One of my favorite songs ever. In some ways, aside from Chris's own version, which is heartbreaking, 2 of the real classic versions of that song are Ray Price and Al Green.
Yep.
And I knew that was one of the songs I wanted to have on the record. I mean, I love Chris so much. I used to see him play at the Riverboat in Toronto in 1971, 72, actually just 71, because by late 71 he started playing Massey Hall. But he was somebody I admired so much, and was around him quite a bit when I was a little kid, and so that was one of the songs I really wanted to do. And I just sent both Ruby and Rachel a list of the songs without any kind of instruction as to how we would approach it. And Ruby called back and said, "I'd love to do For the Good Times, and can we reference the Al Green version?"
Wow.
And so that's kind of what we did. And we started playing, and then when she starts singing, this incredible thing happens. It's just like the world opens up, and heartbreaking.
I'm looking at the mix of you guys, you and Luther, and I'm looking at the mix of your bands, the North Mississippi All-Stars, Black Crows, Blackie and the Rodeo Kings, of the TV show Nashville, and so it doesn't surprise me that there's country, there's blues, there's rock and roll, there's R&B, and there's folk music, and just a little bit of jazz and gospel in there as well. And so the most country of the tunes, would that be Crazy Arms?
Maybe it would be, although Crazy Arms, I mean, the first, I mean, like, I'm sure I've known it my whole life, and the Ray Price version is such a classic. But 2 other versions that really made a big impression on me with that song. One was Jerry Lee's version.
Yep.
which was one of his earliest Sun records, like maybe his second single or something like that, which was fantastic. And then there's a killer version in French sung by Ian and Sylvia on their Great Speckled Bird album.
Wow, that's going back.
Yeah, and it's so great. In fact, that was an element that I had kind of wanted to have. We did a version of "Careless Love" where Rachel sang. She translated, because she speaks French too. Translated a couple of the verses into French, but the take that we did that had the French vocals wasn't quite as magical as the one that didn't. Because we kind of came to that idea afterwards. But I kind of like that because singing French is such a romantic language, and hearing "Crazy Arms" sung in French was fantastic.
You said this is a soundtrack for romance and romantics everywhere, bound together by melody and atmosphere. Is that your way of saying that this is a love letter to your love as well?
Yep, you bet it is.
Okay. I thought I'd just get that in there because, the right song placed at the right time can lead to romance,
It is very true. This is a love letter to Janice Marion Curry Alexander Powers.
Wow.
That is correct.
Did you tell her that?
She's about 3 feet away from me right now. That's why. But it was your suggestion, your question, and I just answered it affirmatively. So I just would tell it.
All right. And I guess we should play "Dearest Darling," the Bo Diddley song.
You should. That's the most country song on the record in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Because Bo Diddley was one of the great country singers, I think. If you listen to his melodies, they're so great. One of the things that Luther and I have in common is a deep love. For me, it came from studying it and meeting some of the first generation protagonists, country blues of Delta blues. And Luther came from it because Luther's, that's where he's from.
Sure.
So it's in his blood. And it's, in his background completely. But we have a deep love of Delta blues players. And one of the things I thought would be a really lovely thing to do, there's a classic guitar pairing that Charlie Patton and Willie Brown did back in the late 1920s and recorded in 1930. They did a series of songs. They were actually Charlie Patton songs, but Willie played second guitar. And one of them played in one tuning and one of them played in the other tuning. And it was a beautiful thing together. So I thought for "Dearest Darling," I could be the Charlie Patton role and Luther could be the Willie Brown role. And that's what we did on that.
By the way, speaking of instrumentals, the "Careless Love," the instrumental track, is just my favorite. I just love that. I love that.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's kind of how we warmed up. That's how we warmed up the church that day.
Okay.
That's the first thing that came out of our guitars' mouths.
Is there any time to tour this?
We were hoping that we would get out there this month because there was a little window and we had actually had a few dates on hold, but it ended up not being in the stars to do it now. We're really hoping that we'll be able to make up for it in the fall, maybe in early September or mid-September, because I know that Luther really wants to do that. Maybe do shows with the North Mississippi All-Stars and the Rotting Matadors and BS.
Wow.
Come and join us. So that's we're hoping to.
Talking to Colin Linden in his home studio, outside underneath the tree or with the birds. How did the Keb Mo project go?
Oh, it was fantastic. It was fantastic. It evolved from what the initial concept was. The initial idea was it was going to be him solo. And then after a couple weeks of recording some really cool stuff, Kevin got a kind of a hankering to have a little bit of accompaniment on it. Actually, it started even earlier than that. We recorded one song that had me and Keb Mo and Taj Mahal on it together because we had just written it that morning and he was eager to record it and Taj was just coming by to visit. So we cut it that way. And so that's really when the solo concept, we began to deviate from it. So the record evolves quite a bit, but it's a truly beautiful record, I think. And he's magnificent. So it went great.
And what was that song again, just for the record?
Oh, the one that we're talking about is called Don't Throw It Away.
Okay.
Kevin wanted to write a song. He wanted to write a song about how how plastic, you can't, once plastic is created, you can't get rid of it.
Yep. All you can do is recycle it and keep the cycle tight.
You got to use it again.
Again and
David,
again.
don't you throw it away.
Exactly.
That's it.
Blackie and the Rodeo Kings. So you guys were down there. Everybody came prepared?
Yep. Yeah. It's unbelievably exciting. I can't wait for everyone to hear it. So I'm going to spend the rest of the spring. I'm working on a record with a guy from BC now called David Boxcar Gates.
Oh, yeah.
He's just coming down here. He's fantastic. He's a one-man band, and he's like from another planet. I don't know the planet yet, but it was a planet that they really, really understand blues. And they dropped him, and I think they dropped him and his dog and his tom-tom and snare drum and two old guitars on the planet somewhere. And he ended up, wandering into our studio, and he's fantastic. So as soon as I finish that, I finish Bruce Coburn instrumental album, and then I'll get back to work on Blackie. So I want to see if we can get Blackie done by the end of May.
Wow. Would we see a Blackie record this year?
I think that there's a really good chance that there'll be a single that'll come in the fall, and then the album will come early in 2020. And I think that 2020 officially is our 25th anniversary together, even though we got together in 1995 toward the end of the year. But it's significant for us that, at this point, we managed to, considering we live thousands of miles away from each other, and we've had all of our different lives. It's really wonderful that we continue to be excited about playing together. And I think it's some of the best songs we've ever come up with, and more songs that we came up with together than on any of our other records. So it's really exciting. We did the whole thing here at Pinhead Recorders, and I think I'm allowed to say it now, but around we're all sort of closer to 60 than we are 50. Mm-hmm. We finally got signed to a major record deal. And
I saw that. What the hell happened? How did that happen?
Sometimes you stick around and people appreciate the fact that you've been, that you're working hard and people like what you do. That's got a lot to do with it. I think also, without any question, the fact that Tom Wilson, at almost age 60, is really he's hitting his stride. Personally, artistically, as a writer, as a painter, as a songwriter, as a singer, like you wouldn't believe. Between the Lee Harvey Osmond record he's got, I think that it's just been such a wonderful time for him in his own evolution. And I have to say that I think that's got a lot to do with with us getting signed.
There you go. Blackie and the Rodeo Kings on Warner Brothers. Who'd have thunk it? How about that?
It's a nice thought. It's a really nice thought.
All right. So we're going to see you where this summer currently?
Calgary Blues Festival, August 1st, for sure. That's Rotting Matadors. That's me and Johnny Diamond and Gary Craig.
Thank you.
And then I think that we're doing Blackie's going to do one of our only shows this year, one of our only live shows this year, is going to be at the Stampede on July 7th. So I think I'm allowed to say that. Okay. And what else? I'm going to do the Saskatoon Jazz Festival solo, June 20th or 21st, I think. I'll get that date right. Winnipeg Jazz Festival solo, like the day after or the day before or something like that, in June. And man, I'd love to come out to Edmonton again soon. Maybe I'll have a chance to do that. And I would very much like to, before this year ends, play in Alberta and BC with Luther. Yep. Because it would be just really fun to do. So it's on my mind.
Okay. We'll be here at CKUA ready to welcome you with open arms.
Oh, thank you so much, TDM.
He is the one and only Colin Linden, 8-time Juno winner, maybe 9 or 10 by now.
9, I think.
Thank you. Luther Dickinson has partnered with him from all of his musical history as well. The two of them have made music together called Amour. It's out there now, and it's on Stony Plain Records. Thank you, Colin.
Terry, thanks so much.
Next week on Mulligan Stew, the podcast, Doug Cox, the musician, singer, songwriter, and producer of the Vancouver Island Music Festival, talks about the incredible lineup of artists that he has coming this summer, including the Muscle Shoals Guys and the best studio band in all of Los Angeles, led by Danny Cooch. That's next week on Mulligan's 2. Just a reminder, please do us a favor. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or Spotify, and let us know you're out there. Thank you.